Not every book in my collection is one that I agree with, politically or philosophically. And this is a very, very good example. It's called Iran and Israel, Wars and Rumors of Wars by Mark Hitchcock. It was published in 2013 by Harvest House Publishers in Eugene, Oregon. And for lack of a better term, this book is a Christo-fascist screed about the end times and how Israel and Iran and the war between the two will lead to the end times. What's particularly disturbing to me about this book and about the philosophy behind it, the ideology behind it, the religiosity behind it, is that this is what we are seeing from the leadership of the Trump administration. For example, Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, is a psychopathic end-timer. So join me as I read some of this book to shed some light on the kinds of megalomaniac thinking that is leading us into World War III. The mullah regime in Iran, according to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, poses an existential threat to Jewish people and their homeland. Iranian leaders continue to spew out venom against Israel that openly unmasks their evil intentions. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has referred to Israel as a cancerous tumor that should be cut out and will be cut out. Several Iranian defectors have made it clear that Khamenei is directly involved in the nuclear program. He makes the final decisions. Scientists who have defected from Iran have given differing measures of the state of Iran's nuclear development. But they were all clear about Iran's true intentions, however. The Islamic Republic was developing the bomb so it could one day attack Israel. Well, you see who's attacked too, right? Ali Reza Forgani, a strategy specialist and staunch supporter of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has released a detailed military plan to annihilate Israel, which he claims can be accomplished in less than 9 minutes using Iranian missiles. He maintains that Tehran is capable of annihilating Israel within less than 9 minutes using its arsenal of missiles and by developing operational combat units throughout the world. Closed quote. He says that Iran will hit targets inside Israel, including nuclear facilities, air bases, and civilian infrastructure. Ayatollah Khamenei has warned of a lightning response to any perceived attack by Israel. That should say, to any preemptive attack by Israel. Excuse me. He said, should they take any wrong step, any inappropriate move, it will fall on their heads like lightning. But Israel is not alone as the focus of Iranian malice. For the Iranian regime, the U.S. is part of its plan for annihilation. Ayatollah Khamenei stated, in light of the realization of the divine promise by Almighty God, the Zionists and the great Satan, America, will soon be defeated. Some Israeli officials claim that Iran is working to develop a long-range missile capable of reaching the United States. Americans believe the threat posed by Iran is great. A CNN poll found that fear of Iran in the U.S. has surpassed fear of the Soviet Union during some of the Cold War's most dangerous years. The poll revealed that 81% of Americans believe Iran is a very serious or moderately serious threat, with 48% calling it very serious. 84% of Americans believe Iran is developing nuclear weapons, and 71% believe they already have the bomb. Despite repeated, drawn-out diplomatic efforts and rounds of sanctions, Iran has steadfastly clung to its right to a nuclear program that the entire world knows is focused on developing the bomb. The Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has said the train of the Iranian nation is without brakes and a rear gear. We dismantled the rear gear and brakes of the train and threw them away some time ago. He also said, nuclear energy is our right, and we will resist until this right is fully realized. As Ehud Barak notes, this is not about some abstract concept, but a genuine concern. The Iranians are, after all, a nation whose leaders have set themselves a strategic goal of wiping Israel off the map. But Barak has repeatedly warned that the time is urgently running out. It seems to have already run out. The drums of war are pounding. 0 hour has arrived. Israel will unleash a unilateral preemptive strike to diminish Iran's nuclear charge. And of course, now 12 years after this book was written, here we are, and that's exactly what's happened. Of course, all the recent developments with Israel and Iran present formidable economic, political, and military challenges for the US, Israel, and other Western nations. A great deal of diplomatic capital has been expended. There are no easy solutions. Confrontation looms. But could the rise of Iran and its stance towards Israel have even greater significance? Could events we are witnessing today be preparing the way for the fulfillment of biblical prophecy? Only God knows for sure, but many signs point in that direction. As alarming as current events are in the Middle East, they shouldn't be surprising in light of the end times prophecies of the Bible. The biblical prophecy in Ezekiel 38:39, written about 2,600 years ago, tells us that a great horde of nations will invade Israel in the last days, while Israel is at rest in her own land. The leader of this invasion will apparently be Russia, and one of the main allies in this confederation of nations, according to Ezekiel 38:5, is Persia, the modern nation of Iran. Russia has risen to world prominence in the last century, and it has experienced a great resurgence in the last decade. Iran is now world public enemy number one, an avowed anti-Semitic state, which has pledged to wipe Israel off the map. The author of this book claims that the current crisis in Iran and the Middle East is the direct fulfillment of any biblical prophecy. He doesn't believe that. That's what the author is saying. However, he says, it is an ominous development that strikingly foreshadows what the Bible predicts. It is a significant signpost that I believe points towards the fulfillment of the great prophecy of Ezekiel 38:39. In the surging events in the Middle East, we can hear the pounding of prophetic hoofbeats. This is what the author of this book says. Israel's strike against Iran's nuclear facilities will probably unleash a vicious backlash. Dominoes will begin to fall. No one knows for sure how they will fall or how many will fall, but we know some will fall. We also know that some consequences will develop immediately while others may slowly smolder. But one thing is clear. Ahmadinejad and the Iranian mullahs already harbor a devilish hatred for the US and Israel. Just think how they would go if Israel stalled their nuclear program. Any military action by the US or Israel, or both, against Iran would undoubtedly plant seeds of vengeful animosity in Iran that could later erupt in the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy in Ezekiel 38:39. We may be witnessing the stage setting for this incredible prophecy right now! Exclamation point! The pieces of Ezekiel's prophetic puzzle seem to be coming together. It appears that the end-time stage is being set right before our eyes. Someday, maybe very soon, the world will be shocked by the fulfillment of an event called the rapture of the church. The sudden removal of every Christian from the world. This next event on God's prophetic calendar will fulfill the promise of Christ in his disciples when he said, "I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there may you be also." At that time, Christians who have died will be resurrected, and every true Christian living in the world will be suddenly removed to heaven without experiencing death. Okay? Together they will meet the Lord in the air and go with him back up to heaven to return with him back to earth, at least 7 years later at his second coming. The disappearance of millions of Christians will deepen the problems the world is facing today and plunge the world, at least temporarily, into chaos. Now, I've got to say I'm not so sure I agree with that. The Jewish people are back in their ancient homeland after being scattered to 7 countries for almost 2,000 years. They are surrounded by a sea of enemies, just as Scripture predicted. Iran has risen to power as both the dominant military power in the Middle East and the world's largest state sponsor of terror. Now, of course, if you think about it, both of those things are actually applicable to Israel, but more on that later. At the same time, the Russian bear has roared out of hibernation to reassert its influence and lend its support to the Iranian regime. Rolling revolutions in the Arab world have created an uncertain future. The world economy is teetering on the brink of recession, or even worse. People everywhere are crying out for peace in the Middle East. Behind all of this looms the ancient prophecy of Ezekiel 38:39, which predicts that Iran, ancient Persia, will be a key player in the end times, and that Iran will join a confederacy of other nations to attack Israel. What we see happening appears to point towards the fulfillment of this prophecy. Over 20 years ago, prophecy scholar Dr. John Walvoord noted that the first key to the Armageddon countdown is that the Middle East must become the #1 crisis in the world. There's no doubt that the Middle East is the #1 hotspot in the world. That piece of the prophetic puzzle is now firmly in place. What will happen next? Where is it all headed? Are there any answers? Can we know the future? What is Russia's role in the end times? What does the Bible say about the future of the Middle East? Will Iran try to shut off the Strait of Hormuz, causing panic on world oil markets? How high will oil go? What will happen to the world economy? Will Iran attack U.S. ships in the Persian Gulf, drawing the U.S. into another war? Will the Middle East go up in flames of a regional war? What will Russia do? What are the final events of history? Is there any way to know what the future holds? Is there a word of comfort or warning of cataclysm? Now, I think we've had just about enough of this. I've read on, and this book gets a lot more detailed about what, this prophetic, Ezekiel stuff. And, the one thing that I keep returning to as I'm thinking about this and reading it through is that if you replace, almost every time, if you replace the word Iran with Israel, you see what's actually going on in the world. It is an example, a really, really good example of how all of their accusations are actually projections, right? They are, confessions of what these people are actually up to and what their ideology is. So many times when you replace when you switch the roles, you say, okay, well, here you are saying this is what Iran is doing, but in fact, it's what Israel is doing now in the real world, right? Iran has shown extraordinary constraint, and over and over again, we see that it's the West that is the aggressor, and sure enough, of course, it's Israel that's on the pointy end of the spear. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I'm not going to read any more of this nonsense, But if you like this content, if you want to see more of it, please subscribe, and thanks for watching. Ciao for now. By way of an epilogue, I wanted to point out that here in Ottawa, right in front of the entranceway of the parking lot of the Iranian embassy, we have a gigantic sinkhole. It really does seem apocryphal, but also typical. It's not the only one. In fact, right up the street, about 3 blocks away, there is another sinkhole. Anyhow, let's hope this is not a metaphorical sign of things to come. Thanks again for watching. All right. Okay. Oh man. I think I have brown paint on my ass. I think that's why this thing is off. Because it was painted. And now I have brown paint on my ass. Oh well, it was worth a shot.